Goals. We're going to review what makes a field trip meaningful versus memorable, because while they can be the same thing, they aren't necessarily, and how you might do both, because that's the goal, right? And not every field trip is going to be a life-changing epiphany. But ideally, you want something to happen that is useful and applicable to the lives of your participants, and also fun, because it's summer camp, so you want to have some fun. You're going to talk about what to consider / plan for when planning a field trip. So thinking about, what do we need, where are we going, what are we doing, and how do I get something valuable educationally and experientially out of a field trip, and how to improve your field trips going forward, or plan really well and start running right away. So when you think about this and you went back to your memories, and I'm sure there's a lot of stories to share, but things that they may have in common. I know for me, memorable field trips, the good, they were fun. They were so cool. There's something unique that I didn't get to know about before, or that you could see the campers or program participants were really looking at something that was super interesting and also brand new to them. This brings something like a lesson or an idea to life. You've been talking about this for a long time in the classroom or in your program, and now you get to see it happen in person. Or you've been talking about like the African savanna, but now you can see zebras right in front of you. That's very different from reading about them. So, memorable trips are inspiring. They can be career impacting. I've heard stories from folks that are like, I went on this trip and it changed my life, and I decided that this was what I was going to do, or that I really didn't want to do this, or that I didn't appreciate this before, but now I saw it and it became real. So it's that magic moment where you can pause and be like, oh my goodness, we've talked about it, but it wasn't real until I actually saw this. Or I didn't think about that people worked this job until I talked to this person. So these are the kind of cool opportunities that a field trip can really bring to heart and bring to life for young people. It can be something that you wouldn't otherwise see or do in the classroom, something that is meaningful and connecting. So if you're like, we're going to go, read something about this or have somebody talk to us for 2 hours really slowly, that falls on the not so good side. Stuff that feels more boring, that's not really interactive, no touching, no doing, not necessarily age appropriate, it's too short of a program. Like you end up in a museum and it's a one-room program and now you have 3 hours. What are you going to do? Or that it's not interactive. So the point's not clear. Why are we here? Like, you don't want to end up with a group of kids that don't really know what their goal is or what the task is. That can be an unfortunate programming incident if that's a thing that comes up. And you also can end up in a situation, or that you can remember, can become quite memorable, traumatic or unpleasant experiences. So I feel like many people like me have, a memory of a field trip where somebody got sick on the bus, or, in the middle of the event, or somebody got lost, or there was a medical emergency. These things do happen, but you want to make sure that you're planned for them so they don't become the memory for the trip if you can help it at all. So making sure that you have planned for all of this and acknowledge that this is stuff that can happen, but with good planning and consideration for your group, your program, and your goals, you can hopefully create not only good, fun memories of field trips, but also really great educational opportunities and make great impact on the experience of the young people in your program. So what makes a good field trip? Why do we take field trips? Consider, what is it that, so what? You have a field trip, you go to camp, you signed up for camp, isn't that fun? Yeah, but if we are going for, camp and you're on site all day, it might be cool to go someplace else and explore something, visit another camp. It might be cool to go to a museum or any number of variety of places. What are you hoping when you plan a field trip? Thinking about, well, in this program, we want to learn about this ecosystem. So we're out in the ecosystem, but visiting this nature center can really bring home some of the ideas because they have animals there and they have certain activities that we don't have access to. So things that they have that you might not have. And then what can you do to make your trip beneficial and impactful for the whole group? So if you're going to go someplace, there should be a reason, right? A good field trip has a reason, it has a purpose, and generally it's educational on some level. So like I mentioned, reasons for field trips: to support your program in a way that your program space can't. Having a fun reward. So we did all of these things, we met this goal, we're going on a trip to the amusement park. At the same time, maybe it's physics camp and we're going to the amusement park because we're going to figure out the physics on all of these rides. A new experience. I haven't been there. We're going to try this out. I have never had the opportunity to go hiking in, this park before. So we're all going to do that. And that's a great opportunity. It's variety. You go to the same place all the time, or if you're staying in the same place and you're at this camp every day all summer, but you can go get a different experience. A lot of camps, you have a beach trip, you have a museum trip, you have like a rafting trip. These kinds of things come up and you think like these are good, they're fun, but maybe they're not educational, but they definitely are. And it's really about working out how you can connect that and what kind of educational experience you're looking for. They could just be time fillers, if you're like, I just want to make sure the kid is safe and is doing something that's not necessarily destructive or harmful. So good space and they're doing something. And so, if they're having fun, hopefully it's more than that. If you have a program running, you've got something like a goal and a connection and something that you're trying to teach. But there are just fun activities, safe places to hang out with supportive, constructive activities. But like movie theaters have opportunities for camp groups to come in and watch movies that have nothing to do with like an educational goal, but are fun for kids. And so fun is a goal and it is important and something that can and should happen when you're having good programming. So considering those sorts of things and making sure that, you can have more than one goal. So maybe you're bringing everybody in your camp to a site, and I'm sure every group has a different goal, but you can all have an equally educational and fun experience. Making sure that you're taking opportunities when you get there to apply the skills that you've been working on as a program. Just because a site doesn't have a focus on one skill, if you're like, this camp is about survival skills, and that does not apply to the art museum. Maybe it does. I don't know. I feel like there's probably creative ways that you can work around that. Look for depictions of certain happenings historically, look for techniques. Maybe you're not looking necessarily at the space so much as how the place is run or the spacing. I'm not sure, but there are ways to consider other angles of a space. In some cases, you were just given a field trip and you have to take it for the program that you work with, and you make it fit into what it is that you do, and you find a way to get your kids to relate to it. And the ultimate goal is the chance to make connections in a way that you couldn't without having gone on this trip or made these connections. So maybe you go swimming every day at the pool at your camp, but then you go to the ocean, and that could turn into a lesson about the difference between salt water and fresh water and what's happening in the pool, or the challenges that relate to the types of swimming that might happen, or just a variety of things like what's actually happening at the beach. Maybe it's not even about swimming. Maybe it's about exploring what lives there, or people watching. I'm not sure, but things that you can consider as you think about your field trips. Also to consider, are virtual opportunities. This is something that's come to light very much in the past year and a half with our COVID situation, and the restrictions that closed down a lot of opportunities that were, previously available. However, you know, while you can't necessarily take a large group of students to a lot of places anymore, there are small groups available, but also there are virtual tours of a lot of places. And as somebody with an environmental education background, I am a huge enthusiast about video cameras in the zoo, like the animal cams. So you can like have a panda cam, or at the aquarium, there's like tank cams. It's so cool. There's one website, I have a list that I will share with you guys, but explore.org has a variety of webcams that are set up around the world of various sites. And it's fun to just check out and see what's going on, and are great for lessons in their own right, but are a good way to support a field trip. If you don't necessarily have to replace your field trip, because they can do that, and there are resources that will be shared. But in the cases where, they can actually support. So if you're going to go to a zoo, say that you've got, a trip happening to the Bronx Zoo, but also you could virtually tour the San Diego Zoo and compare some activities there, or some exhibits, and what the animals look like, or what you can learn about changes in the, what happens with behavior, observations, that sort of stuff. So using these opportunities to compare and contrast, but also go places that you couldn't go. As a person in Connecticut, there's no way that I would be bringing a camp group to the San Diego Zoo. However, we can go check out their webcams and see if we notice some observations that we can make that are different from the ones that are local. So those are some opportunities that are just out there for virtual experiences. And I went with the zoo, but there are lots of different varieties. There are art museums that you could go to, exhibits, the Science Museum, the Natural History Museum. You can go on like a virtual tour. So that's like you're walking through the museum to see the exhibits and understand those things. And in some cases, there are fantastic like tours of places that you would not have gotten in depth if you had gone with your group, but you can watch the tour. And even as things begin to open up, you might be able to have access to those tours and come up with questions to ask the folks that work at the site where you're going to. How does this compare? Do you guys do this? How does this work? So you can gain a whole other level of knowledge with your group and see how things relate. So really, as I talk about all of this stuff, it's about planning. When you go on your trips, you want to make sure that you have a plan. And that's from the very start, when you're like, this is what we're going to go do and learn about, and to the very end, like, that was fun. How about next year? So before booking your trip, you want to consider, what's the goal of your program, right? Where are you going? What is the goal of the trip in your program? So you have a field trip. Are you going to be talking about painting all summer for like 3 weeks, and then you have a field trip happening and it's about engineering? Well, how are you going to tie that back to what you were doing? And maybe the goal is to just think about something completely different on your trip and learn 5 new things that have nothing to do with what you've been working on. I find that kind of highly unlikely, but it could be. And that's up to you and your program and the purpose of what your trip is doing. But ideally, your trip has a reason, and there's some way to tie it back into what it is that you're doing with your group. You want to know who has picked or is picking the destinations for your trips, because sometimes you're just handed that. You're like, you're going to be working with this grade and this age group, and you're going to be in this space, and these are the field trips that you take. Come up with a curriculum. Okay, that's your task. You might be able to say, like, I'm planning this. How do I support this? Is there a suggestion for a field trip? Or they might tell you that your budget is X, Y, or Z, and this is what you can do. And does it make sense to go on your trip, or to go plan a trip, or bring somebody in? Is that more affordable? How does that work? Can you add in a virtual trip to make your points? You want to be able to understand all of that when you're booking your trip and thinking about exactly the best way to support the programming that you have. If you are more in charge of understanding the overall programming and you just have to get stuff booked and the staff that go into your program are there, so you can make general sort of thoughts and maybe add suggestions to tell your staff what it is that you were thinking when you made those suggestions so they could build them into their programming. Or if you're a program staff person, it's a good opportunity to run with it and come up with ways flexibly that you can say, oh yeah, this is how that works. It totally makes sense that we are going to go to the chocolate factory because that relates to farming, and farming is plants, and that's why when we go out into nature and we do plant identification all day as part of our camp, that it makes sense that we would go to this candy factory. That's your job. But making sure that it ties back. Maybe it's about learning social skills. And maybe the topic doesn't seem to make any connection, but then you get there it is. But planning for that so that you can tie in a lesson and make sure that you understand where it is that you will be guiding folks. Also, you're going to want to check out the websites for places. You want to know about lessons, many museums, zoos, and other field trip destinations that are popular with youth organizations and programming have lessons, they have schedules, they have an educational staff, they have planned activities, and they know what they're doing when field trips come in. So you can call them up and ask questions about, best recommendations, or if there's a map or whatever, as you plan along. And if you have the budget, you can schedule a program. There are excellent programs that are designed specifically around what it is that they do, but a lot of times they will also tailor programs to your needs. So if you're like, we're studying this, do you have a program about it? And then they have somebody who come and tell you all about whatever this exhibit is and give you a behind the scenes tour. So those are options that are available, and part of what's really cool about some of the field trip planning. Things you'll need to know about your destination as you're planning your trip. So group capacity, crowd sizes. Is it always crowded? Are you going at a crowded time? Is this discount day? Or, is it Wednesday and everybody can go for free? That's something that's important because you're going to want to make sure that you have really good plans for where you're meeting and safety and all of that stuff. Or would you rather take the group on Tuesday when that's the lowest attendance, because you also want to have time to linger in front of the exhibits? Things to think about. And how much is that going to cost you? Can you afford it? Is that something you have to ask parents for? Is that something that's included in their camp tuition? What does that look like? When are groups allowed? Are they open at this time, or are there certain things where they're just not, accessible? Are you going to get there and not be able to participate in anything until an hour later? You want to make sure that your timing is perfect. Remember that downtime is not necessarily helpful, especially if it's unplanned. So being clear about what it is that you need for your group, know what it is that is your goal and what helps them to be successful. So thinking those things through. You're going to want to know about transportation. If you take a bus, can it wait for you? Can you leave your stuff on the bus? Is the bus going to leave you? Those sorts of things. What are the right rules and expectations for groups? If you have a very rowdy group and they know that the kids actually have to be quiet, or kids can come in and it's going to be loud, but it needs to be very quiet during this show, and you're like, my group, not a quiet group, maybe that's not an option you want to bring your group to. Or you can practice with your group and challenge them to do that. But these are things that you're going to want to consider as you're planning. Do they have lessons and tours available, or is that something that you need to come up with? Ideally, you'll want to go before you take the group so that you can take a look around and plot out where you're going to go, what you'll eat, where you can eat. It's important to know like where your group can eat. Some places have food stands, but you have to buy the food to eat there. And otherwise, you have to go outside and eat, or they have field trip areas. And you'll want to time your tour so that you're nearby those eating areas, because it stinks if you are on the other side of the park and then you have to trek that far to go get your lunch, and then double back to finish the rest of your exhibit, and then double back to go to the exit. So these are things that you want to think about as you're organizing your trip. Also, just making sure that you have emergency plans. What if there is an emergency? What if a participant gets lost? What happens? How do you handle that? And how do they handle that? Where are the bathrooms? Things like that. Stuff that you're going to want to know on your end. So what do you need for permission slips? Are there waivers from the facility? Some trips, like if you go ziplining, they have waivers. Then you need to have signed, so it goes with a permission slip. If you are going to bring stuff for the kids, or if they need to bring stuff with them, so maybe you're providing, I don't know, compasses, but they're going to need to be sure that they bring a safety vest or something like that. You'll need to make sure that you understand what it is that you need to provide as the educator to support your kids, and what they need to bring, and how you can communicate that. So you might have to say, here's the permission slip in the letter home. Maybe you have a master permission slip that everybody's going on, but you can send a reminder home to follow up with that. What is that going to look like? Transportation plan. What do you need to bring? Kids are going to forget stuff. It's just going to happen. That's what kids do. It's okay. You'll want to remind them again and say, hey, next time, please remember to bring this, but we have an extra one, because you don't want to leave a kid unprepared in a way that you could just have helped them and brought something, an extra that they might have. Have your first aid forms, any extra stuff that you need, health needs, pills, inhalers, EpiPens, lunches, food plans. And then you're going to have your emergency plan. What if something goes wrong? What if there's a thunderstorm? What if you lose somebody? What if a parent needs to pick somebody up early? Any sort of thing. What's going to happen? You want to have thought that through and have a plan for it. And I know that a lot of programs have these things already in place, but you might want to just double check on that as part of your emergency plan for a trip while you're doing that. What happens if you get caught in traffic? That's something you're going to want to know. Activities that you're going to be doing, you're going to want to know what those are and have a plan and the materials for it. And your communication plan with your group. So when you get there and you split up, what kind of communication plan are you going to have? Where will you meet? All of that stuff. Preparing your participants. So you have your plans, you know what's going on, you've got your trip permission slips planned out, and you've told parents, it's on your calendar. Now you want to make sure your participants know. And maybe this is something that went out in the first week of camp, and they've been talking about this for weeks, and they're super excited, and that's always great. You want to make sure that expectations are clear and even, and you can set that straight and make sure that they know what's up. You probably don't want to surprise people and show up someplace, without letting them know where you're going. In some cases, surprises can work, but generally it's good to involve your young people in your daily scheduling plans so that they can be prepared. Also, if you're using this as an educational opportunity, you'll be able to prepare them for what they need for supplies, who they'll be working with, making groups, pairing kids up, who are they going to be paired with, when can, this be talked about, what do you need to know, what do you need to bring from home, how much money do you need to bring with you, what can you eat, all of those things to consider. And if a kid is going to stay behind because they can't go, there's a doctor's appointment, or the parent has chosen that they didn't want them to participate in the trip, you want to prepare so that you can have a backup plan to make them feel more included. So maybe they're going to stay with this other group and do something they're really excited about at the camp. Or maybe your campers can help broadcast the trip so that they can see it or record it, so that they can get some of the experience that they couldn't participate in. Okay, so you have your backup plan, you have planned everything, you're packed, you have all the materials you need, And now all you need to do is get a good night's rest the day before, get up on time, be ready to go, double check and make sure that everything and everyone is all set and has everything they need, and travel safely. Get on the bus, have songs, have your rules and your seating plans if necessary, review your plans and expectations with the group. And then make sure that you've also got like activity plans for in between, because one of the big catches is what happens if you have to wait. So a lot of times at popular sites, the buses sort of arrive and line up and you're sitting there and stuff is going on. Groups get noisy and they get a little chaotic. So the more you have planned, the less opportunity there is to find other things to do, as kids will tend to do if they don't have a plan. So, making sure that you've got that in between emergency sort of thinking and no need to like wander off, and you make sure everybody's on task and ready to go. And then you can enjoy your trip. So when you get back, make sure that you do debrief. Maybe this is as you're gathering as a group or getting on the bus on the way back or when you get back or the next day, but sit down and definitely talk about what it is that they got out of the trip, what they did or didn't like. Was it fun? Would they go back? Were there pictures? Did you have them take pictures? Did they participate in the activity? What are the results of the activity? Um, Even if your goal is to just be like, who's our winner? And the winner is the line leader tomorrow. Like, what are those goals? Follow up. Don't just let something hang. Like, we did the scavenger hunt at the zoo, yay, and then never talk about it again. Because then they're going to know that that's not important. Nobody looks at it and they've wasted their time. So you want to encourage that, okay, we did this and you learned this. And what did you learn? And you talk about what happened and maybe the winner gets a prize or something. You share the videos. Maybe you write reviews about how it went and you share that. Maybe you take a moment to do a reflection exercise. Maybe you draw pictures. Maybe you craft. Maybe you blog. However you want to do that, but making sure that you tie back your experience, what happened, and what it is that they've learned or didn't learn. Like if it went terribly wrong and nobody had fun and it was super boring, like why? Talk about like, why was the experience boring, or what would you change till next time, and should we go back? And then how can you tell the campers for next year if they're going to go, how can you make this better? Remember to bring the right shoes, or remember to bring an umbrella, those sorts of things. And then can you write a thank you note? Say thank you if you had a good time. Even if you didn't have a good time, think about what it is that was positive from your experience and how you can say thank you or reflect on the positive pieces. What can you pull out of that is good for you and that you can take away? And also, um, debriefing with your families. So you had the campers come in, you came back, and your families come, they pick up the kids after camp or they're dismissed normally. But challenge your kids to share their experiences. Families are paying for this experience, but at the very least, they've chosen to support this kid participating in your program. And generally, they want to know what's going on. And depending on the age group, the kids may be more or less forthcoming about what happened, but challenge your kids to share their experiences. So what's something that you're going to make sure you're going to tell mom when you get home? Or is this something you can tell your family that this is fun and we should go back? And what would you do if you were with your family? A lot of places have experiences that only like family groups or small groups can do. So like, is there a way that you can do this? Is there something you could do for like a raffle prize or something to get tickets? If there's a donation or something to get to this field trip place, anything like that, to connect back to families and think about creative ways to share their experience. And is there something that they can incorporate in sort of an end of program celebration? Maybe you can present something or pictures or collage or any sort of creativity that you can use to tie back to the field trip, because these are fun, unique experiences. And not only that, but it's often a unique group of people. You hang out in summer camp or summer programs with people that you're not necessarily going to be hanging out with during the school year. And that's a cool opportunity. and then debriefing your own experience, because that matters too. So what worked? What did the kids gain from this? Was it worth your time? Was going to this museum useful? Do you feel like, because it can be fun, stuff can be super fun and not super educational. Is it worth the fun time? Maybe. Maybe it's just like we're at summer camp and this is fun. We're going to do something that's fun and it wasn't towards anything else we were working with, but they had a really good time. And maybe you might consider replacing it with something that is educational next time, but maybe you're like, nope, we just want to keep that because sometimes you just want to have fun. What is it that your administration needs to know? Like, this guy didn't have my records, but I brought this receipt, so we didn't have a problem. But next time, we want to make sure that you keep a copy of the receipt because they don't keep good records. Or do you want to go back? That place was terrible. They were so rude and they weren't prepared for kids. Or they didn't have a place for us to eat, and so we had to eat on the bus, and we walked it all the way to the back of the parking lot, and it really wasn't worth the trip. And so maybe we should try this other museum next time. What are some of the key things to remember for next time? Like, they have space, they have these things, and they're ready for this. Oh, maybe use the bathrooms here instead of back there. So making notes like that for yourself, but also for your fellow educators who might follow in your footsteps after for the program. So taking those times to have feedback, offer it back for the facility and for yourself and for other educators to make sure that the next group has an even better experience. So for your closing reflection, let's think about what are some of your planned trips already, and are there ways that this information can help support that? Are there ways to supplement your trip with activities? Do you have an activity plan for everything? Is there something here that you're like, oh, totally forgot, should add that in? Or is this all old hat for you? And this is great. And I'm glad to know that I know all of this. And that was good. Maybe there's some ideas for some trips on the board. Check out the links page as well at the end of this. If you're going on a trip again with the same kids, consider, you always have the kids are like, I've been there. Okay, but let's make it a new experience because you haven't been there with me at this program doing this activity, studying these things. So how can you find that change? And maybe consider that in your planning in the future. Like, all right, have you been here? What can that do? Can you offer a leadership opportunity for somebody who hasn't been here before? I don't know. Some thoughts to consider. And also, were there unexpected learning opportunities? Was there some new exhibit? Was there some, I don't know, random like visiting animal that you encountered on a trail that you were hiking and you weren't expecting? Was there opportunity for fun? Should you have brought something that could have been fun? Did you get a good idea? And what was missing? Were you like, what would have been really great is if we had brought da-da, or if I'd let everybody use their cell phone to take these photos, or, oh, that was a terrible idea, no cell phones, or laying out ground rules in the future for exactly how to use this because people were fighting over it. Making those notes and considering those things and how can you move forward for programming when you consider how your field trips will go this summer. I hope that you have the opportunity to plan really fun and meaningful field trips. And I thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation.